Hey guys, Proper English here, and today I'm going to teach you how to build an adder. Now, as you might guess, an adder is a circuit that uses logic to add two binary numbers, or you might not have guessed that. Either way, why should you care about how to build an adder? I think that's the first question that I should answer when I'm showing you anything like this. Why should you care? Well, some of you will care because you're interested in building things like ALUs and CPUs and getting into that sort of redstoning. But I'm sure there are going to be many people who are watching this video who couldn't care less. And so for people who really don't care about using binary addition in any of their builds, there's a good reason to learn how to build an adder. The logic behind this is great. It's just something that can teach you how to apply logic in a more complex way. Once you begin to understand how an adder works, you're going to start to understand how you can use logic to your advantage in redstone. In fact, as many of you know, I'm an administrator on the RDF, so I give people trials. I've seen people use concepts from an adder in builds that are completely unrelated to addition. Someone was building a Guitar Hero game as their trial, okay? And he used a half adder, which I'll show you how to build. I forget exactly what he was doing with it, but it had nothing to do with addition. He was just using the logic, and he didn't even know what a half adder was. So there definitely is value to learning these concepts, because once you begin to understand logic, you'll find that there's so much you can do with redstone. So hopefully I've sold you on watching the rest of this video, and let's get started. So as you might have noticed, all I've got in my inventory is a block, a torch, some redstone, and a lever. That's because I'm going to show you how to build a very old school adder. So, a really early design using basic gates. It's really easy to understand and easy to follow. And by understanding the concepts, you'll learn how an adder works, and then you can learn how to build more complex versions if you're interested. So let's get started. The way that I'm going to go about teaching this is basically looking at the different operations that an adder needs to be able to perform. So first, let's learn how to add 1 and 0. So in any bit, we're going to be adding 1 and 0, 0 and 0, or 1 and 1. Okay, so let's learn how to do, this will be 0 and 0 and 1 and 0. So we're going to use an Xor Gate. Okay, so if you don't know what an Xor Gate is, I'm going to have a need to know video that explains this. And we're going to use a very simple Xor Gate. I'll give you a brief explanation here. An Xor Gate is a gate that is on, where the output is on when only one of the inputs is on. So exclusively OR. So the output is on when only one of the inputs is on. So let's get that set up, and there we go. That is our Xor Gate. We'll add a little output there and some inputs with some levers. And so this is going to allow us to add 1 and 0, 0 and 0. Okay, so right now, this is what we're going to call the A input, and this is the B input. And so both of these are off, they're both zeros. So you can see that when A and B are 0, the output is 0. We're going to call the output the sum. Okay? So now, let's add 1 and 0. So we'll turn A on. So 1 plus 0, you can see the output is 1, and that's correct. We can do it the other way too. We can turn A off, and we can turn B on. Now it's 0 plus 1. Same thing, the output is on. But now, let's take a look at 1 and 1. So we're adding 1 plus 1. Well, this is an XOR, so the output is off, but 1 plus 1 isn't 0. Now, if you remember, when we're dealing with binary, in each bit we can only hold a value of 1 or 0, but the next bit over can hold twice the value, okay? So this would be a bit valued at 1. The next one over here, the one that doesn't exist right now, would have a value of 2, okay? So what we can do is we can carry. And what we're going to do is we're going to add an AND gate to this XOR. Now it turns out that there's already an AND gate built into the XOR. All right, so we can see that here. So let's take a look at that. So right now, both inputs are off. This torch is the output of our AND gate, and we can see that it's off. If either one of these is on, but not the other, you'll see that the torch is still off. But if they're both on, the torch is on. So that's an AND gate. And we're going to use that as our carry out, okay? This is going to allow us to carry to the next bit. And we can, actually I'll do it exactly how I did it over there. We'll toss a block up there. And there we go. So that's going to allow us to add two numbers. So we can add one, or a 1 or a 0, and a 1 or a 0. But we need a way to handle the carry, right? Because so if I had another bit over here, we'd have this output from the first bit, the carry out, going into the second bit. But we'd also have an A input and a B input. So we need to be able to add three numbers. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this circuit here, which is called a half adder. I don't think I mentioned that. And we're going to turn it into a full adder, okay? And the way we're going to do that is by adding a second Xor gate. All right, or a second half adder. We're going to start with a second Xor gate. Okay, so let's throw that together. And throw a couple of torches on here. So there we go. Torch, 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 torch. All right. And now we're just about set up. So now the way we've got this set up is we've got the output from our first half adder, the XOR output, going into one of the inputs in our second XOR gate. All right. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add the second input over here. This would be coming from, let's say there's an imaginary bit over here. We're calling this the carry in. Okay. So let's throw a lever down so we can use that. And we can see how that works. If I turn the carry in on, we're having an input coming from this bit over here, carrying in and turning this bit on. So now let's take a look at this. Let's add 1 and 0 again. All right, or actually let's start with 0 and 0. So 0 plus 0 is 0. This sum output right here is a 0. 0 and 1 is going to be 1. And 1 and 1, we're seeing it carries out. And this sum output for this bit is off, but we're carrying over to the next bit. But now, what happens if we've got one of these inputs on and a carry in on? Well, now our sum is off, and we still need to carry over to the next bit. So how can we do that? Well, we can turn this XOR up here into a half adder, like this, and throw some wire over here, and add it to the carry out. So now, what we're doing is we're adding 1 from the carry in, plus 1 from the B input, and it's carrying out to the next bit. Okay, so there's one more setup that we should look at. Let's try adding 1 plus 1 plus 1 and see what happens. So A is on, B is on. Well, now we see we're carrying out, but now if we turn the carry in on, we're getting a sum output too. So if this were the 1 bit, we'd have a 1 here and a 2 here, and that would be 3. And there you go. That's how to build an adder. So let's take a look at a bunch of adders linked together. All right, so I've got 3 bits here. Let's take a look at how they're connected. We've got a carry in coming into the first bit, though we're not going to use that today because that's for subtraction. We'll deal with it next time. We've got a carry out from the first bit that should look familiar, going into the carry in of the second bit. That's the wire going to the block here. Then we've got a carry out from the second bit going into the carry in of the third bit, all right, just like the first and the second bit. Then the carry out from the third bit is going nowhere because we don't have a fourth bit. All right, so let's add 3 and 0. So we're going to turn the B input for the second bit on that's valued at 2, and the B input for the first bit on, so that's valued at 1, so 0, 1, 1, or 3. And you can see 3 plus 0 is 0, 1, 1, and there you go. Now let's add 1 to that. All right, so we'll turn the A input for the first bit on. So let's look at how that works actually. So we've got 1 plus 1 here. And now we see, since we can't hold something that's valued at 2 in the first bit, we're going to carry that over to the second bit. So we'll see this torch is on, that's the carry out from the first bit, value of 2. The output for the first bit is off, the sum output. So we're carrying over. The thing is, now we've got 2 from the carry in plus 2 in the B input. So that's going to be a 4. We need to carry that out. So now we see that happening in this second half adder here. So we've got the carry in plus this output, the XOR output from the first half adder. Well, we're going to carry that to the third bit, and that's valued at a 4. So 4 is on, so that's 1, 0, 0, that's a 4. All right, so now let's try adding 3 and 3. So we've already got this A input on, and we've got 3 in the B inputs, and we've got a 1 in the A input. So let's add a 2 to the A input. We'll turn the A input for the second bit on. Now let's take a look at what's going on. So same situation in the first bit. We're going to carry this over into the second bit. But now, because we're already adding 2 and 2 in the second bit, we're carrying out with the first half adder. So in the first half adder, we see carry out is on, but the XOR output is off. Okay, so we carry out to the third bit with a value of 4, but now we can take a carry in from the first bit and output a 2. So that's 3 and 3 is 6, or 1, 1, 0. So that's the 4-bit and the 2-bit are on, giving it a 6. And there you go. Now you know how to build an adder. So if you were interested in doing binary addition in Minecraft, you know how to do it. If you weren't interested in doing binary addition in Minecraft, you know how to do it, and you know how to apply some logic in Minecraft using redstone. And I think that's a very, very valuable skill to have. You're going to find that as you start to understand this sort of thing, you're going to come up with new ideas and figure out how to do all sorts of cool things. So I'm going to provide a world download with this, and there's also going to be a need to know. I was a little pressed for time tonight, so I didn't get to record it, but that will be out at some point tomorrow, I think. I'll record it later in the day, and we'll see if I can get it out in the evening. And yeah, so I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I'll see you guys next time.